Welcome to Discussing Fitchburg Now. I'm your host, Sam Squailia. Our show is going to be on Facing Addiction, the pilot program that Fitchburg is one of 15 in the nation to be chosen for. And we have a large panel of guests of coalition leaders. Right? Mm-hmm. Okay, welcome everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go around the table and introduce ourselves and what organization you represent.
So my name is Irene Hernandez, and I represent Fitchburg Community Connections Coalition, and I also represent the Three Pyramids Minority Coalition.
And I'm Susan Buchholz, and I'm here representing the Joint Coalition on Health and also the Facing Addiction in Fitchburg and Beyond program.
I'm Mikaila Tuner-Clarke, and I'm representing Community Health Connections, Action Healthcare for the Homeless.
Hi everyone, I'm Kate Duffy, and I'm a recovery coach working on behalf of AdCare Hospital with the Fitchburg Police Department and Health Alliance Hospital.
And I'm Ernie Martineau. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Fitchburg.
Matt Lemay, Captain with the City of Fitchburg Police Department.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone, for coming on. Okay, so the Facing Addiction program. This was an application that was submitted by the Joint Coalition on Health.
Correct.
Which is what you represent, Susan.
Right. And the coalition really is grassroots. It's been around in this region for close to 20 years, and it's never been a 501c3. It's not an agency. It is a group of concerned citizens, and the roots of the coalition are really in Fitchburg, the Fitchburg Neighborhood Association and the Gardner Neighborhood Association. And they got together, they knew that we were stronger together, and over the years we've had some amazing success just working together. And most recently, we asked our members, what should we really be focusing on? And overwhelmingly, they said we really need to look at addiction. So we got together, and one of the first things we did is reach out to a national organization that was really leading the way and having a lot of impact. And they had an application process looking for 15 communities across the United States, and we applied. And we were kind of amazed that we were chosen, but really thrilled because it does present us with, we're really excited about the opportunities.
Yeah, because the list of other communities that were selected to participate in Facing Addiction's pilot community project are Annapolis, Maryland, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Billings, Montana, Chicago, Illinois, Springfield, Missouri, San Diego, California, and Fitchburg, Massachusetts, among others.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And so your agency, the Joint Coalition on Health, you also put together the Community Health Connections.
Yes, that was one of our projects. Our process has really been over these last 2 decades to do community health assessments and to really find out what's going on in the community, where help is needed. We conduct the community health assessments, we share them broadly, and then we decide as a coalition what we want to focus on. And in the past, there was a need for we recognized there was a need for a community health clinic in the area. Burbank had shut down, there was no hospital, and so we worked with our partners and we developed community health connections. And since then, they've expanded, and it's really something that is needed and appreciated by the community.
Yes, it's expanding into the Market Street, the Water Street Market Basket Plaza with the Community Health Connections Action Services.
Yep, specifically the action part of Community Health Connections is focused on healthcare for the homeless, the underserved, publicly housed. And we've been sort of a part of the larger health clinic up on the hill, but I think for a lot of my patients, a lot of the community that's chronically homeless, getting up that hill is like getting to Timbuktu. So we're really excited to be closer to right where everybody is. If it's within walking distance, they're much more likely to come. It's one less barrier to care. So we're super excited.
Great. Okay, so the Facing Addiction program. So what it's really doing is connecting all our community organizations together with a national kind of directive.
Yes.
Of how to kind of work with the ills of addiction.
Right, and to make a greater impact. You know, the Facing Addiction has only been around nationally for about 2 years, but they've made, in that short time, they've had incredible success. They worked directly with the Surgeon General and helped to present the first ever Surgeon General report on addiction. And that was a really big deal, because if you remember years ago when the Surgeon General did a report on smoking, it kind of changed the whole dynamic. And it also helped funnel needed funds into that issue. So it's really great to be part of this national project. And I just want to say also that there's a reason why Fitchburg was chosen. It's not a dubious distinction, as some might assume. The reason that we were chosen is because of the information that was in the application. And the information was a snapshot of what's happening here in Fitchburg. We had the full unequivocal support of the mayor, and we were able to describe the efforts of the police department, the outreach efforts, community health connections, community connections, how we're supporting families, how we're reaching out, and how we're having really difficult conversations, because this is a very emotional topic for many. There's no easy answers, but we're willing to come together and talk about it and try new things. So that's really why Fitchburg was chosen.
What I think is important just to follow up with what she's saying is, one would say, out of 15 communities across the country, why us? The city of Fitchburg is no different than any other community across this country. Every community is facing addiction. What distinguishes our city is a few different things. We have many collaborations in place here within the city, and I'll tell you, we're really working as a team here in the city. Everybody is moving in the same direction, but we have different groups all coming together at the table. That's when things really start happening. And you combine that with the support of local government, the support of the mayor's office, things can really get done. So I think it's very important to distinguish that. You know, we're one of 15 communities, but we're no different than any other community across this country facing addiction issues. What we do have in our advantage is a very strong grassroots collaboration effort here in the city, where we're not afraid to work with each other. We can have open conversations, and I think that's a difference between us and many communities. It's something that really sets us aside.
That's good, because then we're not repeating efforts. We're doing everything we're doing. We're working in tandem with another agency that's also helping in another way. And if you just know what every other agency is doing, then you can direct resources to the right location.
Well, that's what I do. So when we first started this process with facing addiction, the Joint Coalition had decided to focus on the opioid crisis, in this city, but also across the nation. So that's when we created a subcommittee, and then it just took over, because everyone is interested in finding resources and helping save families and keep them together, and figuring out how to eliminate those gaps in services. So I think with the coalition, what our efforts are is that we find resources, we bring them to Fitchburg, we connect families. So whether it's for DCF, when the children are taken away, kinship or whatever, or we'll go to speak with Tara and say, hey Tara, do you have a place for this person to go to? Like we are a working
Recovery
group.
Centers of America.
That's right. And we are a working group, and oftentimes I call Chief, I call his officers, and we have these very clear, vulnerable conversations about what's happening in our community, because we understand we need to come from that place in order to best serve our community.
So the Facing Addiction program is kind of like an umbrella that helps connect everyone.
Right. And it's a very simple concept. I mean, this problem can seem overwhelming and pretty hopeless. I mean, people who are watching, I imagine that almost everyone has been touched by it in some way. And if you haven't, chances are you will be. And it can feel very isolating and frightening, and we can do more and be more effective when we work together. And that's what Facing Addiction nationally is about. It's about uniting all voices and they have about 43 million people involved in the Facing Addiction movement. And so we're part of that momentum. We want to be part of it. We want to learn together and work together. And as you said, not duplicate efforts. You know, we talk a lot about working in little silos and how we want to avoid it. It's almost become a cliche. However, as much as we talk about it, we tend to still do it. So we want to recognize that, and you know, we do. We communicate a lot with each other. We have each other's cell phone numbers, and we text each other, and we're constantly sharing information. I also I didn't want to not mention a very important program that's in Fitchburg that was part of the application process, and that's the Sheriff's Office and the great work they do over there at Community Corrections. And
Down in Clegg-Gorn?
Right. And they have a diversion program. Sometimes it's referred to as a drug court, and they do amazing work, and that was also highlighted in the application, and likely one of the reasons that we were chosen.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about the specifics of what the Facing Addiction program is, because generally it's we're connecting agencies, but what are some of the directives, right? Is there anything that we're changing, things that we do now?
Well, so we are collectively as strong as we are individually. So everyone here at the table is facing addiction. The work that we're doing, we're sharing it. We're achieving individual results, but also collectively, we're strengthening our results because we're working together. Right now, what we're doing as a group, and this is a fairly new designation, so we're really just kind of getting off the ground. But what we're doing right now is we're actively getting the word out, recruiting people, and we're looking for people that perhaps have never been involved in something like this, or they're
agencies,
people,
community,
everyone,
individuals that want to help.
Anyone people who I would encourage anyone to reach out to us. People who don't know where to get services, people who want to be involved, who want to have their voice heard, people who are wondering what they can do to help. This really is about a coalition built one person at a time. This really is the strength of our community members. So no one is discouraged from joining us.
So who should we contact if we want to get involved, if we think we want to be part of this coalition?
So there's a couple of ways. As I said, we're just kind of rolling out our communication plan. We're so excited about things that are happening, but we are because we're grassroots. We currently have very few resources. Our resources are our people. So we are.
So there's no additional grants with the Facing Addiction program.
Not yet. What they have done is they have committed to work with us to apply for additional resources. But right now, what we're building is we're expanding our coalition. We want the community to come to us, be involved. We have an upcoming training in October, and information about the training and also ways to get involved. You can go on Facebook at Facing Addiction in Fitchburg and Beyond. It's just recently been kind of developed, and more to come. And also, you can contact us via email at the Joint Coalition on Health at gmail.com. So those are a couple of ways.
So it's Joint Coalition
Correct.
on Health at gmail.com.
Correct.
Okay, great. All right.
Yep.
So how else?
I'll just jump in. I like to look at the big picture. You were talking about what are we doing and how is it working and how do people get involved. If you look at a year project, the way Facing Addiction National is instructing the 15 communities to get started is in phases. And the phase we're in now is sort of rallying the troops. And what I like about this is they've asked us to think about our community in different segments. So we have, is it 5 or 6 segments? But if, I may not get it exactly right, but we have business, we have education, we have municipal services, we have the schools. And so wherever anyone, this is what Susan's saying, anyone who wants to be involved in a larger effort for the city and a national program can jump in. And we have teams with captains, very early stages, getting our marching orders. But as an example, I'm co-chairing the families team. Just as an aside, I facilitate on Wednesday nights, not tonight, but up at Community Health Connections. We are gifted the space from Community Health Connections, and Luck, an agency in Fitchburg, who sponsors the program. It's a family support group. So anyone,
the recovery conversations?
Recovery conversations. So anyone who has anyone in their life who's struggling, either in recovery or trying to find recovery, can come to that group at 6 to 8 on Wednesday evenings. So myself and Michelle Dunn and Paul Richard from Shine are the co-captains for the family team. So we're each speaking to families saying, hey, would you like to be involved in facing addiction? There's a lot more to do, but we just want to gather the troops. And then there's a business team, and there's faith leaders, and police and fire. So all parts of the community are coming together.
So anyone can get involved, but who specifically would be best tailored to join, right? Like what sort of business might?
Oh, for business, anybody.
Anyone.
There really isn't a parameter because
Well, addiction
everyone's
doesn't know
affected.
any parameters.
Right. Addiction knows
is facing
no-
every
yeah.
socioeconomic barrier that there is. It's in every possible family dynamic that you've got. So I think the focus on it being anybody in the community is really where it's at, because that's how, if we're going to face this, if we're going to try to really treat this, we've got to stop thinking that it's either this way or that way or
those
that way.
people or these people.
Correct.
I would
Yes.
imagine business leaders, one, who want to be involved in the community, two, who might have trouble in their area near their business.
Okay, yeah.
Three, they're personally involved, either
Right.
themselves or a loved one, and many reasons why,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be a specific business. It doesn't have to, nobody has to have background or training. It's about a passion for the community and wanting to look at this as, how can I jump in?
And
how can I
everyone
help?
has something to give and to contribute. So it's not a set person. It's everyone has something that they can contribute to this effort.
Right. Like media.
Right. No,
So is it like an email list that you're gathering right now? Just a contact list?
It's certainly the way that we're communicating.
Email.
It's certainly the way that we're getting the word out. Like I said, we've just developed a Facebook page. We are developing a way of better communicating with each other. So the email list can help us share resources, share events. We have a monthly meeting, which is led by Michael King, who is the national leader of engagement for facing addiction. And
So a monthly, like a phone-in conference call?
In
Yes.
person. Well, he calls in, but we meet. Right, yes and both.
Right.
So everyone gets together once a month in person to discuss things, and then there's a national conference call that you call into.
Correct. And then in addition to that, a couple of key leaders from each of the 15 communities meet on a national call with leaders from the other 15 communities. So we can share what's happening in Chicago, what's happening in San Diego.
What are
and
you doing differently than what we're doing?
Sharing
How can we
ideas and
share-
bouncing off of each other.
What's working
That's
here?
fantastic.
Yep, and one of the things, it's really fascinating because I just watched, so we've connected with them on Facebook as well, and it's fascinating to see them doing some of the amazing work that we're doing, but also running into some of the same challenges. And in many cases, we feel that we're, in a better place. There are some communities that are struggling to train their officers and to provide Narcan. So, in many ways, we're kind of ahead of the game in some of these communities. So it's encouraging, but it's also very informative to be talking with them.
Great. Okay, so we're going to cut to a quick break, and then we'll be back to discuss more of the Facing Addiction program. Very good. Hello, I'm here with Donald Flagg from the Crossing Over Sober House.
What's going on?
Hey.
How you doing today?
Good. Okay, so we're talking about the Kobata 5K.
Yes, we
the
are.
second annual.
Second annual, can you believe it? It's already been a year.
Already a year, I
Oh
know,
my
time
goodness,
flies.
amazing.
So this is a 5K race that the Crossing Over Sober House holds to raise money for scholarships for
Absolutely.
men for the Sober House to continue their journey into sobriety.
Yeah, so we created this event to help raise funds, just like you said, creating scholarships for a lot of guys entering into early recovery. And last year was our first race, and it was a huge success, obviously. So we're like,
Even in the rain.
I couldn't believe how cold it was, and it was actually shocking. We were super impressed with all the people that came out.
Yeah, we got a picture of in the rain, the running.
Oh, it was.
Right, can
it
we
was
pull
cold.
that up?
It was cold. It was cold. Cold and rain and wet.
There we go.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
See, everybody's up with their ponchos.
Yeah, it was great. The kids had a great time. People had a great time, and they supported the cause, and we met so many amazing people.
So this is a loop at Coolidge Park. It starts at Coolidge.
It starts at Coolidge. It goes down John Fitch Highway. It goes all the way down towards, down by the hospital where that new school is. Takes a left. Sizer. Yep.
Up Mechanic.
Up Mechanic. Comes right out to North Street. Comes right across. And comes right back down.
So it's a little hilly.
Little hills. Yeah, actually, it's more hilly than you think. I actually did it last year, and I was like, wow, this is a steady, slow increase.
Yeah, those are the toughest ones.
Yeah.
It looks flat.
It looks flat, but it was great. It was a great time. A lot of people had a great time. So we're looking for more people to come out, support the cause. It was absolutely an amazing time. We're looking for more people to come out. We're going to have some more activities. We're going to have vendors there.
So like resource vendors?
Yeah, tons of resource vendors. I think we actually are going to be up to like 20 this year.
Nice.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And so, we were able to help quite a few guys last year, and we're looking for the same support to give those guys. And if you come down, you might meet some of them. Hear some of the success stories.
So you can sign up in advance for the 5K and save a little money. You can go to crossingoversoberhouse.com/5K.
That's right.
And you can find the information to RaceWire.
Yeah, RaceWire, you can do on RaceWire, or you can go right online and to register. One of the great things that we didn't do last year that we want to do this year is that if you create a team, the largest team, we're going to give 10% back of what we raise to an organization in honor of whoever they want.
Oh, that's nice.
Absolutely.
That's a good incentive.
Yeah, absolutely. So get a team together. Come out and run.
Okay, so the Crossing Over Sober House 5K, it's all for a good cause,
That's
and
right.
it's a healthy, fun event where you can run with your friends.
Are you running?
Maybe. I might. You might twist my arm.
I love it. I love it.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Donald.
Thank you.
50 or 60. So it's just exponential.
And welcome back to Discussing Fitchburg Now. We are discussing the Facing Addiction pilot program. And we have all our guests here today that are all involved in agencies that are dealing with addiction. All right, so for this segment, I'd like to discuss what we're doing specifically within the different agencies. Right? Can we talk about the Fitchburg Police Department and the AdCare coalition?
Sure. I'll give you a brief overview, then I'll turn it over to the captain who's been charged to be the commander of anything that deals with opiate crisis here in the city. We started addressing this issue many years ago, a couple of years ago, when it really started popping out at us that we were facing this crisis, not only in the city but nationally. And it was at that time that we started approaching it in several different manners. We approaching it from the law enforcement perspective, educational perspective. There's many different tentacles when it comes to addiction, and we did our best to make sure that we could get out there and find the best practices available, not only here for the city but across the region and the country.
We can't just arrest them and
you can't
be done with it.
That's a cliche term now, but you can't arrest your way out of it. From a law enforcement perspective, our first goal was to change the stigma with addiction. And I thought that was extremely important, that we, as police officers, start looking at it in a different direction, that addiction is an illness. Right. Doesn't mean we're going to give up on going after drug dealers. That's my number one priority as law enforcement here in the city, is to eradicate drug dealers in the city. And that's my number one priority as law enforcement. Then you put another hat on, and we're also part of the community, and I recognize that. The police department is part of the community, so we have to take a different approach to it. We've been very lucky where we've created partnerships with the district attorney's office. DA Early has been extremely supportive. Sheriff Evangelitis has been extremely supportive. We spoke about the community corrections facility. here in the city. We have some fabulous partners.
They provided a Narcan grant of $150,000 last year.
We're extremely fortunate, just the partners we have here in the city. You know, between the DA's office, the district courts, I have to mention the full support we have of the city council, full support we have from the mayor's office. We're working as a team. That being said, I'm looking for best practices that we can do here in the city. And we were very fortunate a couple of years ago where the district attorney provided a grant to the city of Fitchburg that we could team up with AdCare Hospital, and thus our relation started with Kate. At that point, I kind of switched it over to the captain, and I'll let the captain explain to you exactly what we're doing in the city. But it was important just to give you a brief understanding that, you know, we didn't wait for this to just blow up in our face. We took the initiative. We realized that we have to be part of the solution.
Right.
So that's what you're seeing from the police department. So
And we had been given a 1-year grant, and then now we're continuing on past our 1 year. Did we get another grant?
Very fortunate that the DA extended it another year.
Great.
So we're now into year 2, and we're actually expanding upon that as well. So I'll let the captain explain a little bit further.
All right.
So what we did last year, we did an outreach program where when we received overdoses, we documented all our calls like we would, and we wanted to make sure that we checked on these people after a post-overdose. So we would do house checks. Kate and I would go out, find the people that were in our communities that we could go check on and knock on doors. We knew that they had a problem. We wanted to get them the help that they needed, and we just knocked on doors. Plainclothes officer. Really? Knocking on a door with Kate. Hey, we're here to help. We're here to give you some services, and to see who we could offer those services to.
So they overdose, they're in the emergency room, and you visit them. And then after they go home, or they go to...
Or some we missed.
Okay.
If we missed them.
Oh, okay. Then you you go right to their door.
And it's a challenge because some of the people that have overdosed in the community...
They see the police knocking on the door?
Are not Fitchburg residents, so it's hard for us to outreach to people in other communities. But our biggest focus is to try to help, obviously, the people in the city right now. And anytime we had a local address that we could check, we were there knocking on the door within a week. You know, we're here to help. Kate's here to talk to you about the services that AdCare can offer, and we were able to get some people into treatment as a result of it. And it was very beneficial last year. The boots on the ground approach is certainly a great approach to this problem.
Right.
The more people we have out there knocking on doors and checking on people, talking to family members that their loved ones have had addiction problems, that's a great approach that we have, and we're going to continue with those efforts this year as well, with the additional resources that we have.
Right. Having a recovery coach for the aftercare.
Yes.
An additional point I'd like to make is the services provided by the city of Fitchburg and the police department, they don't end when the 911 call ends. Right. Some people think as soon as they call 911, it's all over. We put the person in an ambulance and it's this. That's the furthest thing from the truth. The call continues. We're continuing to monitor anybody that's in crisis, and thankfully through this grant, you know, we're getting to people in crisis at the most critical time. There's no more critical time than someone that has just faced a death experience. Narcan is a wonder drug. It is revived and saved countless lives. And that's at the point where you really want to get to people. You want to get to people when the crisis is at its worst. And to have someone like Kate that we can get them into the hospital has been phenomenal. So it's important that I stress that we go well beyond the 911 call. The services are continuing.
It's following up.
It truly is. It's you know, the looks on people's faces when we show up at their door in plain clothes, but we're representatives of the police department. Hey, we care about you. What can we do for you? What other services can we provide for you? You know, it's a kind of a model we took from our domestic violence team. We've been doing this for several years, dealing with victims of domestic violence. And like I said before, we're always looking for best practices. We're not reinventing the wheel. We saw great outcome within the domestic violence community where these follow-up visits have a significant value. So we just changed it for domestic violence to opiate crisis, and we're seeing success. We're far from out of the woods, but with teams like what we have in place, we're moving in the right direction.
Now, I'll jump in on the recovery coaching piece, and I just want to say I had no idea what police did prior to this experience.
In reference to
in any way, just as an individual, right? You see it, but you don't know until you're in the car or you're on the inside. And I am completely blown away with this police department, led by our chief here and Captain Lemay. The commitment, the passion. When I read a comment, I feel like my brothers and sisters are being talked about if a comment is negative about the police, and I think, oh, we gotta let the police know that this feedback's there because it's actually not what's happening. So I just love any chance these guys can get to share really what is happening. And I'll say next about the intervention at the emergency department. I was pretty gung-ho thinking we'd get this large number of people to run off to treatment. I'm in recovery myself. I am recovering out loud. I'm not anonymous. And my last time I wanted to go to get treatment. However, we found, and I heard you say this is a great opportunity because it's you didn't use the word bottom, but it's a death experience. Unfortunately, the way this illness works, the first thing people want to do when they get to the ER is leave. And it isn't. There are many reasons why that is, and I will share with anyone anytime at length what I believe is happening, and doctors and nurses and psychiatrists can fill in. But we don't know what we don't know at that point. And so what we started to see with this grant is a peer-to-peer is what's making the difference. So typically someone after an overdose, and they're there just a couple of hours, maybe 5 or 10% would ask for help. And those are typically people that are, out of luck, out of resources, and know they're going to get really, really, really sick by detoxing, and they ask for help. When a peer goes in, if they may even say no to a nurse or no to a navigator in the ER, when they say someone's in recovery down the hall, 90% of them say they'll talk to us. And so my measure of success wasn't if the person went to treatment. My measure of success was, would they talk to me? And what we started to see last year, which is still following through, that individual's not necessarily wanting help that day, but when you hang around recovery, you get in the car and you go to a meeting, or you go have breakfast, or you go take someone to CHC or somewhere. And
when you're
around it, it's contagious. Yes. And within the first few weeks, the vast majority, well over 60% of the individuals who had overdosed in the ER would go to treatment or engage in recovery in some way. So that's where we were seeing tremendous success. So the Recovery Coach Academy is one version of being trained as a recovery coach. There's programs all over the state where the Recovery Coach Academy can certify and train individuals who are either in recovery or have a loved one, or they just have a passion for helping, can become a recovery coach. We're going to need a lot more recovery coaches.
So, and there's a recovery coach training coming up?
Next week there's one in Devens.
You can find more information at the Tipping Point Recovery?
Tipping Point Recovery on Facebook has the flyer up. There are a couple of spots left for next week. We have a great group of 12 individuals. We have police, fire taking the Recovery Coach Academy. We have nurses and doctors and moms who've lost kids and husbands and people in recovery themselves. So we're super excited about that. And they're led all over the state as well. But yes, there's one coming up next week in Devens. Insurance is talking about picking up recovery coaching because of the results.
Right.
We are going to need a lot more.
So they don't have to keep paying for the constant emergency room visits.
Right. The hospital's looking at programs for increased recovery coach, because obviously I'm with one person on my team. We can't cover all of them. But the other thing I just want to add is how this community is working together. And I said this the other day on the radio channel when Senator Flanagan was there for Recovery Centers of America's. One of the situations recently, because it was an individual that I knew from last year, she had relapsed. I had contact with her family. The police went to her house right after the overdose and said to her aunt and uncle, we want to reach out for help. And I was called in the emergency room by her aunt. She was in the bed, and she was shocked and not mad.
She was shocked that they called you?
That her aunt knew she had overdosed, that the police had gone to her house to say to her aunt, we just want to reach out and say we're here. And some individuals might get angry. She was just blown away at the community. So here we have
thankful.
Thankful. Here we have Health Alliance, we have the police, we have me working on behalf of AdCare, although it is a community program, so we don't just use AdCare. We have, all these individuals. So it's a small
taste. So she felt like everyone was trying to help her.
And it's a small taste of what we can do, but it's really important that we feel that hope that,
Yes,
well,
yes.
we have so far to go.
Yes.
That's an example of the troops rallying together on behalf of one individual who's working and getting well.
And I think to add to that, the pivotal point in all of this is to treat others humanely, to treat them with integrity, to see them and affirm them, and to believe that they can recover, because they don't need any of the other junk.
Breaking that stigma.
That's right.
We carry enough of it ourselves.
Right.
If you ever want to find the shame that we
Yes.
want to put on people, and I'll tell you, I was one of those people 10, 15 years ago who would see someone on the news who had her kid in the car, and I'd think, oh my gosh, what would cause someone to do that?
Yes.
And I'll tell you right now, I had my grandson in the car while I was driving and shouldn't have been. And I'll share that with anyone, because I can't stay with that myself. I have to tell others, because it was not me in that seat doing it. And so and I'll tell you, we as individuals in recovery, we're the hardest ones on
Yes,
ourselves.
yes.
So we don't need to load them with shame,
That's right.
because we're already feeling it.
Yes.
And that is still an enormous barrier, even in recovery ourselves.
Yeah.
Because once you get it, you tend to think, why aren't they getting it? Why aren't they getting it? There's so much complication with the neurotransmitters and lack of dopamine and trauma.
All about the dopamine. Yes.
Yes, it's all about the dopamine.
I think that aftercare piece that you're talking about is so important, because addiction, it does change the brain, both in the short term and in the long term. And getting someone stable medically and then they're safe to release, that's just a tiny, tiny, tiny part of it. You were saying, who mentioned the tentacle, that it was a mini tentacle. And tentacles is good. I look at it as layers. There's the medical parts and the neurotransmitters, the dopamine changes when we take a medicine that has such a huge surge, and then the body changes over time and says, well, we don't need to make that feel good chemical anymore. There's plenty coming in, and so just naturally the mood is flat and dull and dark, and things that used to give pleasure, playing with family, seeing your kids laugh, and all these little things, they don't feel it. And that takes a long, long time to come back, even in the face of sobriety, and having that peer support and someone that's walked the walk, that they don't have to feel the stigma with, someone that knows that story, I think is so important. It's so important.
And having these conversations, to me, is the most exciting thing. When I was falling hard in my addiction, people weren't talking about it around me. And that's scary for families. Families don't know a lot of this, and they
don't know how to talk.
Oh, and they
to
don't.
people.
And the analogy I give a lot is if one of my loved ones became deaf, I would learn sign language. And so here we have people in recovery going home, and families don't understand the illness.
They want to
understand
pretend like it's
recovery
not
language.
happening.
Oh, they just want to stare at us and think, "Are you okay?"
Or it's over now. And
Are you on drugs now?
It's
Right,
never.
right.
It's not over. Yes,
It's never
exactly.
over.
So
It's a
the
relapsing,
conversations to
remitting
me
disease.
are a big.
Because when you're coming back to build. And so then the family and the loved ones are hesitant because of all the drama junk.
Because what other illness lies and steals the way addiction
Yes.
does?
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
the problem,
It does.
I
Yes.
think.
Yes.
You know, we can have compassion for other illnesses because they don't do the things that we do
Right.
when we're using.
And that's a big, you had asked about specific segments of the population. I can say that there's tremendous value to the entire community when people stand up and say, I'm in recovery and I'm a hardworking, contributing member of the community. And when some people doubt the value of Narcaning a person over and over again, putting aside
the 3 strikes and you're out discussion that they've been having.
Putting aside the fact that that's someone's loved one,
Yes.
someone's
Right.
child,
Yes.
someone's husband, that's also a future productive citizen. That's
Yes.
someone who needs to be working. That's somebody who could be contributing to the community. Michael Botticelli, who is from Massachusetts and who's leading the Graken Center in Boston, he's a person in long-term recovery. He's done amazing things. Throughout the country, we have people who are in long-term recovery and are wonderful contributing members of society.
And they can relate to this issue with other people.
Absolutely.
The bottom line is that the dead don't recover. And so, yes, it is exhausting, and it can cause a lot of burnout to treat the same person over and over and over and over. And there's so much emotional pain, I think, as you were mentioning, because addiction causes so many destructive, painful behaviors. But ultimately, it's about saving lives, because where there's life, there is hope. And you never know which time it's going to be that's going to stick. And so I think having the conversations, reducing the stigma, because you're right, it's our sisters, it's our brothers, it's our moms, it's our elementary school teacher. It's not them. There's no them and us. It's all of us. It's a community,
families.
and as a community, we have to work together. Absolutely.
And Mikaila, so you deal with CHC Community Health Services, Action Health Services, and you deal with the homeless on a daily basis.
I do. I deal with the homeless, and I deal with, not all of my patients are homeless, but a lot of them are homeless, either chronically homeless or temporarily homeless, or they struggle with long-term mental illness. And as everyone at this table probably already knows, the overlap between chronic mental illness and substance abuse and addiction, they're so closely intertwined that the ability to try to treat them both at once is both absolutely necessary and incredibly difficult, because there is so much self-medicating that happens early. You grow up in a disadvantaged community, or even a regular household, but you take something one time and you got a knee injury from lacrosse or something like that. But especially if you have a history of trauma, if you have a history of depression, you're more likely to become addicted compared to the next person. And if you start early in your adolescence, when a lot of adolescents try stupid things, that's just sort of, I don't know, it was pretty stupid when I was an adolescent. But if you have those predisposing risks in the background, you're so much more likely to become addicted.
A genetic component to addiction?
Well, they're still trying to figure out exactly whether it's a genetic component or whether it's a familial component. But we do know that the research shows if you have trauma, if you have depression, you're more likely to become addicted. If you start substance abuse in your teens, you're more likely to become long-term addicted than if you start
prior to your brain being developed.
Because of it's the brain plasticity, especially in the prefrontal cortex. That's the part that's responsible for being able to make choices. That's why when you're 17, you think driving really super fast, is a great idea and I'm never going to die. And by the time we're 25, we're a bit more cautious because that part of the brain has kind of done cooking. And if you start using before that's done cooking, a lot more damage can be done in terms of impulse control, that sort of compulsive need to repeat a behavior, and it's much more difficult. Not impossible. There's always hope, but it just increases the risk a lot.
So what kind of connections do you have right now with the police department, AdCare, and recovery coaches in your segment of the community?
I think we get a lot of referrals just in general from the community, from Leominster Hospital, patients that are repeat shows that don't seem to have primary care, that don't seem to be connected, or they go into treatment facilities and then go out, and go into treatment facilities and go out, but there's no ongoing relationship. And I think that
when you say treatment facility, you mean like a rehab?
Like a rehab, like an AdCare, like Spectrum, even short-term kinds of places, and that there's no one keeping that long-term relationship going. How are you doing? You've been clean 3 weeks. How are your cravings? What are some things that we can do? Because if we do accept that addiction affects everybody, then the ability to treat addiction really belongs in primary care, not necessarily in specialized boxes or silos, as you were saying. And so we get connections that way. People have been red flagged that they don't have primary care, they don't have behavioral health. And we try to connect them with the services as quickly as we can.
So you act as a recovery facility, an after recovery facility.
Well, I don't know if we actually have that title. I know we do have a Suboxone program. We do have mental health support. We have psychiatry. We have primary care. And if we see that someone needs a higher level of care, then we try to also refer them to there. So if someone looks like they need a day treatment program, we'll refer them. If someone looks like they need inpatient, we'll try to get them engaged and to go to that, get on the phone, see what beds are available right then and there, because you've got to strike when the iron is hot, right in that moment of readiness to change, because it's fleeting. Yep.
And do you also do the Vivitrol
We do. We do Vivitrol. We do.
Do you do
Suboxone.
methadone?
We do not do methadone for addiction because you have to have a special license to do that. There's a methadone clinic in town. To actually, I believe Spectrum and Habit OpCo do methadone, but we do the Suboxone program, and we've just started doing the Vivitrol injections as well.
And Community Health Link in Leominster does them as well.
The methadone?
Yeah, Vivitrol and Suboxone.
Vivitrol and Suboxone. I think Spectrum has an OBOT program as
Right.
well. There's a lot of programs, but it's about everyone knowing where to send. You know, like not to.
And it's also a lot about having that person who's your advocate, who's your champion,
Yes.
who encourages you, who maybe literally and figuratively takes your hand. You know, there's very few illnesses, if you could imagine going to the emergency room, having a heart attack, and sitting in the waiting room for 14 hours before you get services. But if you go there with a mental health crisis, that's likely to happen. There's very few illnesses where while you're in treatment, you're told, we'd like you to have some follow-up care. Here's the phone. Please call every treatment center and see if you can find yourself a bed. If we can imagine doing that with someone who's suffering with cancer or diabetes, we are literally asking the impossible of people who are seriously ill, and we're asking them to coordinate their own care.
To be their own advocate.
Yes.
Yeah, you see the beds open list every day. There's a new what beds are open in the entire state.
Right.
And it's very little.
So a big piece that's missing is that advocate piece, and families are not necessarily doing it because they either don't know because they're being lied to, which is what we do, or they don't know what to do. And I'll just also throw out, the police always say, you can call us. It's pretty cool that you can call the police department and be linked to services. I actually just got a call from the court today, someone at the court. That's, I think, a big problem is families who are terrified don't know where to go or what to do. But I'm thinking back to the history of AA and NA and the recovery fellowships. There was always someone right there when you walked in the door to help you.
Yes.
And that's missing today because, I mean, there are people there in some of them, but drugs are more accessible. and so that advocate piece, because we're supposed to be the general contractors of our own recovery, but we're missing pieces of our brain. So we're not the best ones. And we're lying to people, so they don't know what they can do. So that's where there's a lot of messy pieces. And that's where the conversations like this and the conversations with the police and this joint coalition and Facing Addiction and the recovery conversations group and Learn to Cope, an outstanding resource for families. I say to families, if you're not in Learn to Cope, your loved one has less chance of going to treatment. If you want your loved one to go to treatment, you go to Learn to Cope.
And where does Learn to
Cope is all over the state and creeping into other states. It's learn2cope.org.
Learn2cope.org.
And it was founded by a woman whose son was in recovery years ago, and it's an outstanding. There's one at Haywood Hospital, and there's one at Worcester. Those are the closest to here. And
this is a monthly, weekly?
It's weekly. It's families recovery meeting. A lot of resources, a lot of how-tos, talk about different types of programs, talk about how to stop enabling and start supporting recovery. It's complicated.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that when we think in terms of beds and meds are not the answer. Getting an open bed provides some respite for the family and the person for maybe 3 days or a couple of hours, but it doesn't solve the problem.
A couple of hours?
It can be, well, in terms of an emergency room, it could be because you're saving someone's life. But it's not the answer long term, and we know that people go into these programs over and over again. It's almost a revolving door. And the reason is that we somehow think that just because a person is detoxed, they can kind of take it from there. And we couldn't be further from the truth because the person's brain hasn't even kind of cleared yet. They're not thinking clearly. They need someone to take their hand and lead them to resources. This takes a while to recover. And so I just want to remind people that it's important to have the beds. However, if it's a system that just maintains this revolving door, then no matter how many beds we have, we're not going to solve the crisis. This is something that is going to be addressed in our communities, in our schools, with our law enforcement, with our courts.
Pre-addiction, current addiction, post-addiction, for the family care.
Correct.
You have to.
Correct.
You have to,
That's 95%
the whole sphere of influence.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to stress the educational part of it.
Yes.
Yes.
If you're ever going to break the cycle of addiction, it needs to start with education.
Yeah.
We all want to save people's lives. We all want to care for the people who do have a crisis or an addiction issue. But if we don't address it through education, we're never going to break the cycle. We might as well just stockpile on.
We talk to the people who aren't addicted yet.
You have to.
Yeah, families.
You have to. It's that is one of the biggest components of this crisis that we're facing, is how to best educate our next generation out of this.
And how do we heal them?
We've been fighting addiction with cigarette smoking for 50 years.
Right.
How many different campaigns have we gone on for the ill effect of smoking? I personally think one of the strongest areas to fight this crisis is through education. I've had several conversations with our local schools on how best to do that. But education.
We discussed the sheriff's program. Face.
Yep.
Yeah, and he does that as early as 4th grade, right?
He does. He comes out to the city of Fitchburg. He's been going to the high school on a regular basis. Sheriff evangelitis. It's called Face to Face.
Face to Face. That's right.
And it is so important to provide that education to our youth in our community, because if we're really going to break the cycle of addiction, it needs to begin with the children in our community.
Yes.
So I think it's probably one of the most important components.
I think that a huge component here is as well, Chief, is when we're talking about trauma. So when we're doing this education piece and we can start identifying those gaps in services in mental health, if people can get cleared or work out their childhood trauma, this will give them a better chance of success in the future from becoming addicted. And I think that even for most cases that I'm aware of, because I've been very codependent for many years, and then I had to do my own check-in, right? And then by going back, even when the recovery is there and the connections in community is important. So as we have the recovery coaches, the mental health, we have the community supporting folks, we also have to bring resources to the grandparents. Yes. The grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. So we do that once a month at Seven Hills. And it's so painful, because here we have grandparents who were ready to retire, and now they have babies at home. And not just that they have babies at home, but they're worried and sick to death every day about their child, right? So how can they parent their grandchildren while they're sick? And while they're stressed out about their child out there in the street, right?
So that's more family support.
Yeah, so then we do the family support. We go back, so we have the grandparents, we have the parenting classes, we have the mother's group, the father's group. We try to encompass the different areas because everyone has a different need.
And where can we find out?
At the family support center, at the Mock Family Resource Center.
Mock Family Resource Center.
And Fitchburg Community Connections, it's at 356B Broad Street in Fitchburg, right above the Horizon Church on the 4th floor. So, these are the things that, as we continue to work in community, all these layers, all these tiers or tentacles, whatever it is, we have to keep connecting folks to those resources so that there isn't gaps in services. And I think that's what Facing Addiction and the collaborators and the coalition is working, just with all of our passions to create those possibilities.
To find the gaps.
That's right.
And connect the resources.
Yes.
And just get people talking, because the more we talk about it, I think, openly, and we talk about it as something that is not a shameful secret. It's not something you've done wrong. It's not something your child has done wrong. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with your family. It's a disease. It can strike anybody. The more we talk about it, I think the more the stigma will go down, and people will be less isolated and less afraid to ask for those supports. And because how many people have we met that have been like wanting to ask, or like I've got a brother or an uncle or whoever that's addicted, but I've been keeping it to myself for a year. I didn't, because they carry that stigma inside them. And I think the more we talk, the more we're a community, the less that will happen, and more people will survive.
The vast majority of those that are addicted to opioids started on legal prescription medication.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. If we had, as a country, said, let's create an addiction crisis, we couldn't have done it better. We couldn't have done a better job.
That is very true.
We allowed business, the pharmaceutical company, to decide how many drugs would be prescribed and how often, and we created a perfect storm of addiction.
We were required to treat people's pain.
Right.
We were told that the opioids were not addictive. Right, it's a non-addictive.
It was marketed as a non-addictive.
It's funny, we were talking about this. The district attorney brought in Sam Quinones for several different sessions up here. And to have
The Dreamland?
The Dreamland, the author of Dreamland. Fantastic book. It really places the blame on major pharmaceutical companies and the bill of goods that they sold us many years ago that opiates weren't addictive. And if anybody hasn't had an opportunity at least to pick up the book. It's really a fabulous book. It talks about the pharmaceutical companies. It talks about the cartels that bring this poison into our country. It's pretty amazing book.
Yes, it is.
And I think, but in addition to the availability of drugs, which always increases chances of people becoming addicted, we also have increasingly communities that feel cut off and disconnected from each other. And so when the chief talks about education, we have prevention methods that are available for schools. However, we as a country tend to think that prevention's not very sexy. It's not something we want to talk about. It's not something we want to put resources in. But we know, the science is there, that if we support our children when they're young and provide them with mental health counseling if they need it, if we provide our families with, if people have safe places to live, if they have good food, if they have jobs, children grow up in a stable environment, they are far less to become addicted, they are far less to drop out of school, to become pregnant early in life. So we know that universal precaution does work. Universal prevention works in schools. However, that's not where we're putting our resources. You know, there's a great parable about people rushing to the river to save all the babies that are drowning in the river, and we need to go upstream and find out how all these people are ending up in the river drowning. We have to save the people.
We're being reactive. We need to be proactive.
And we need to do both at the same time because we're in a crisis, we're in an emergency. However, every time we go out and save a parent, we are increasing the chances that their child will not develop this addiction themselves, because that child is living in a traumatic environment, and if we can help their parent recover, then we're responding to the emergency, and at the same time we're increasing the chances that that child will never have to become an addicted person themselves.
I must say, what you're speaking of, we're very fortunate to have a senator right in the next city over to us, Jennifer Flanagan, who's been a champion behind everything what you're speaking of about educational components, and some of the legislation she's put forward addresses just what you're speaking.
With the opioid crisis and the mental health issues.
I mean, we're very fortunate that we have a senator right in our backyard that's advocating as strong as she does.
Yes. I think sometimes there tends to be this reaction from parents or from families like, well, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to put that idea in their head. My child is innocent and I want to keep them innocent as long as possible, but that's just not accurate. Talking about it early in an age-appropriate way, of course, increases their ability to make better decisions. And the idea of, well, I'm just not going to talk about substance abuse. I'm not going to talk about mental illness. I'm not going to talk about all of these things that are difficult to talk about. Then you're unprepared.
And that's what we're doing here. We're having the discussion, and that's a great thing that Facing Addiction program is going to do with us in this pilot program. So this is the Facing Addiction discussion that we've been having on FATV. For more information on the Facing Addiction program, you can go to Facing Addiction in Fitchburg and Beyond on Facebook, and you can email jointcoalitiononhealth@gmail.com. And if you want to get involved, if you're a business, if you're an individual, if you're an agency, and you want to get involved in the coalition of the Facing Addiction program, email, contact, and you can be part of the solution, right?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for coming on, discussing Fitchburg Now, and discussing this issue. I think this was a great discussion.
Yes.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right, great. So this has been Facing Addiction on Discussing Fitchburg Now on FATV. Thanks for watching.